Have you ever wondered why someone who once believed so strongly can, well, become that faith's biggest critic? Today, we're going to unpack a really fascinating framework from our source material that suggests the answer isn't just about evidence. It's about a powerful psychological bias that might be shaping our entire search for truth. Okay, so let's dive right in with the core concept, confirmation bias. You can think of it as your brain's own personal shortcut. It's designed to keep our worldview consistent, which is great, but it does that by looking for information that proves what we already think is true. This can make it, incredibly tough to actually change our minds about something we feel strongly about. So that's the big question we're tackling, right? How does this little mental shortcut affect something as huge and personal as our faith? We're about to see how our source material uses this one single psychological idea to explain the entire complex journey from belief to disbelief. First up, the source applies this idea to a very specific group, former believers who go on to become really vocal critics. And the framework suggests that their motivations might be a lot more complex than they seem on the surface. According to our source, these critics often fall into two broad camps. On one side, you've got potential financial motives, where criticizing a faith can actually become a career. And on the other side, you have these deep internal psychological drivers, things like inner conflict and even a full-blown identity crisis. To really dig into that financial angle, the source gives a specific case study. It focuses on John Dellon and his Mormon Stories platform. The argument here is that a space for discussing doubt can evolve into a professional and even profitable enterprise. And to make its point, the source brings up the numbers. It highlights this really significant jump in compensation over 9 years. The idea being put forward is that when criticism becomes your job, it creates a financial stake that could potentially compromise total objectivity. But look, the source is clear. It's not just about money. There's also what it describes as a kind of psychological roadmap, a journey that it breaks down into 3 pretty distinct stages. And here is that roadmap. It all starts with something called cognitive dissonance, that really uncomfortable feeling you get when you're holding 2 conflicting ideas in your head at once. According to this model, that discomfort can lead to a serious identity crisis, and from there, a powerful need to justify the decision to leave, often by framing that old faith as something truly harmful. So this need for justification, it leads to what the source calls a paradox of disbelief. It's this deep psychological contradiction that it observes in a lot of people who leave their faith. Okay, so here's the paradox in a nutshell. How can someone talk about all the positive things a faith gave them while at the same time condemning the very institution that was the source of those things? The source claims this internal tug-of-war is actually pretty common. So on one hand, you have this acknowledgement of the good fruits. The source points out that many former members will openly praise the strong community they had or the moral teachings and positive social life they enjoyed. And yet, on the other hand, to satisfy that deep psychological need to justify their exit, they might also need to frame that exact same institution as being deceptive, controlling, and ultimately really damaging. The source frames this as a direct challenge to that old scriptural test, by their fruits ye shall know them. It really creates a logical and emotional puzzle, right? If the institution itself, the tree, is fundamentally corrupt, then how could it have produced such positive things, the good fruit, in their own lives? So, how does the source solve this puzzle? It argues that the real answer isn't found in evidence or logic, but in something way more fundamental. It all comes down to our personal desires. And to make this point, this source contrasts 2 kinds of people. You've got the intellectual giant on one side, who demands hard, empirical proof for absolutely everything. And then you have the spiritual seeker, who approaches truth with humility and, more importantly, a simple desire to find it, even if it can't be put in a test tube. And this, right here, brings us to the core thesis of the entire framework. It claims that our spiritual journey is ultimately guided not by our brain, but by our heart's deepest desires. From this point of view, a powerful, intense desire for truth can open the door to faith, while a constant demand for intellectual proof can become the very wall that blocks the way. And that is the final, pretty provocative question this framework leaves us with. It challenges us to look inward and ask what's really driving our own beliefs. Is it our rational mind in the driver's seat, or is it the deeper desires of our heart?